Now, it's also true that, I mean, that's the position of people who believe that Hubbard was right, clearly was right in the United States, and believe that his work can be applied, and that the data is reliable and can be used overseas. This flies a little bit in the face of the Department of Energy, the EU equivalent called the International Energy Agency, which is their energy group, Energy Information Agency.
Right.
And it flies in the face of the USGS, the Geological Survey.
How so?
Well, I'll tell you in a second. Let me just point out that the big oil companies, ExxonMobil and BP and the other large integrated oil companies also say that we're not at the peak. If you look at what they publish, we're presently at 80 or so million barrels a day. ExxonMobil is predicting that we will be producing worldwide 110 by 2030. BP, something similar. The International Energy Agency, closer to 130, almost not quite double what we're producing now. Okay? So the question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're of the belief that we already have peaked. So what evidence can you bring to bear to support that view?
There are two things to look at. One is the fact that the Hubbard methodology worked perfectly in the United States. Another is to ask yourself, what would you expect to happen when we begin to reach the peak? In other words, and demand continues to grow, particularly in Asia, where India and China are growing very rapidly, industrializing rapidly. Certain countries in Africa are industrializing. Even countries like the United States are growing, not at 10% a year, but at modest even 1 or 2% a year adds up over 10 years.
Right.
So if there is in fact an increase in demand and an inability to produce to meet that demand, what you'd expect to see is runaway pricing. You might expect to see $60, $70, $80, $100 barrel oil. Okay, well, that's what you see. Okay, the proof seems to be in reality.
You don't think it could be a political inflation?
No, the best information I have is that OPEC is producing as rapidly as they can. In fact, the Saudis have made promises to expand beyond their current 9.5 million to 10, 15, 20, and most people in the industry believe that's just talk. They simply can't do it.
So these projections by these large oil industries might be very self-serving. And I mean, they would of course want to say that we should stay in this industry longer because that's the industry they're in.
Well, no, they need to sell gasoline. See, there are two ends of this, two elements to this industry, and it's important to understand the industry because it'll come up again when we talk about local pricing or other forms of substitution. There's what's called upstream, which is the discovery and production meaning bringing out of the ground, of petroleum to be sold in the open market or to be sold at market prices or to be sold internally to yourself but on the books at a market price. Then there's the downstream, which buys petroleum either in the open market or from its own production and converts it to products, a whole slate of products. We talked about that earlier. Motor gasoline, diesel fuel, home heating oil, chemical intermediates or chemical raw materials, jet fuel, and so on. Now these products have to be tailored to the needs of the individual market. You don't sell the same gasoline in Minnesota in the winter that you sell in New Orleans in the summer. They're sensitive, market sensitive, and demand sensitive. And so in many respects, the upstream is separate from the downstream. Now, so what would an integrated company which owns both need to do? Well, the first order of business is to make sure you find as much as you're going to produce. They haven't been doing that. That's a problem in the industry. Discovery rates have lagged behind production rates. Then you have the downstream side, the downstream is under great pressure now because of the pricing. People are very angry at the downstream end of the business. I think they generate the cash that has to be used for exploration, for operating the company. I think that I think they're doing the best that they can. I tend, maybe because I came from that industry, but I tend not to be critical of the behavior of the oil industry. I'm a bit perplexed. They own coal. They own shale. They have studied technology for conversion. What I'm perplexed about, what I don't grasp, is why they haven't implemented this technology on a very large scale.
Okay, if I understood correctly, you're basing your statement that we've already reached our peak on the pricing behavior.
Well, I think the shortages, the pricing is reflecting the shortages, and the shortages are reflecting the truth of the model that we proposed.
Okay. Okay, but that information is also available to the other
Absolutely.
companies which project it differently.
So
How do you reconcile that?
The reconciliation is entirely speculative, and your guess is as good as mine. Some people would argue that we are emotionally tied to petroleum, that it's too difficult to contemplate leaving the fuel source that brought us through the 20th century and everything that we survived through the 20th century. There are people who say that we'll be able to find more. Generally speaking, the government reports say, we don't know where it is, but it's there and we'll find it.
Okay, and they might put that into the mix.
And they do put that into the mix.
Okay. So you're not putting that into the mix?
Well, I'm saying that what we will find will not be sufficient to take us beyond the peak. That's what the Hubbard argument was about.
All right. Okay, so we're coming to the near the close of this first segment, and I feel that we've gotten a good background about the history of oil, its use, and now we really want to come to the meat of the subject, which is the solutions to the problems.
Okay.
And maybe we'll just touch on that to just whet the appetite of our listeners so that they'll come back next week to hear more about how we're going to solve this problem as a country, as a planet. So if you just kind of give us the first few points, what are the technologies that can change the energy shortages?
Well, I believe that the solution is fairly straightforward. First of all, the only thing available to us is conservation, because it takes 5 years to build a plant, whatever that plant is going to be.
Right.
So for now, what do we do tomorrow? What we do tomorrow is we stop using eight-cylinder vehicles. We stop using SUVs as much as we can. We choose our trips carefully. We try to reach 3 stores on the same trip instead of 3 separate trips. We just pay attention to the fact that oil is expensive.
This is a very vast subject, and it's a very important subject. And we really have to learn more about it. And we're very fortunate to have Dr. Leader with us today, teaching us about the history of oil, its usage, the problems with that dependence on oil, and we're going to go more into the solutions. We just gave you a little sneak preview on that, and our second segment will be all about the solutions and a vision for a new energy independence for tomorrow. So once again, very, very happy to have you here, Dr. Fred Leader.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Shalom.
Shalom. Shalom.